Chapter 10. Aisha and Ahmad were taken to an army hospital for checkup and treatment of Aisha's leg wound. Ahmad placed a call to Aisha's dad to share the good news of Aisha's rescue. Yusuf was initially in disbelief, and he asked to hear his daughter's voice for confirmation. Ahmad handed the phone to Aisha, who greeted her dad. Yusuf was speechless for several moments, for he never believed that a day like this would come. It had been months since the abduction of Aisha, and the pain on his family had been enormous. Aisha broke the long silence, and she asked of her mother. "I am lucky to have come out of the horrible ordeal alive," she said. "How is Mama?" Again, Yusuf was silent for a while before answering the question. "Your mother, my beloved wife, died a month ago from the grief of your kidnapping." "Oh no," Aisha yelled, screaming in anguish and throwing the phone on the floor. Aisha's screams alarmed Ahmad, who was sitting in a chair next to the hospital bed Aisha laid on. "What is the matter?" Ahmad asked, as several soldiers rushed over. Aisha cried loudly and would not respond to Ahmad's question. He picked up the phone from the floor, and luckily Yusuf was still on the line. "Something terrible must have happened. What is it? Please tell me," Ahmad pleaded. "My wife has passed on. The hurt from Aisha's kidnapping killed her," said Yusuf. "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about that. It is awful. And a pity that she is no more with us to see her rescued daughter again. Damn it," said Ahmad. "She never recovered from the shock of Aisha's kidnapping," said Yusuf. "Aisha was her only daughter, and as the days, weeks, and months rolled by and Aisha did not come back, she assumed Aisha was dead, and she lost the will to live," said Yusuf. "It's very unfortunate. May her soul rest in peace," said Ahmad. Aisha was inconsolable. Memories of her mother and all the good times she had with her flashed through her mind unceasingly, and her sense of loss was compounded by these cherished memories. The soldiers, who were now all aware of her harrowing story, were sympathetic and condoled with her. Ahmad, whose duty it now was to cheer her up, hugged her and wiped her tears. Aisha's leg wound had significantly healed by the 7th day of her treatment at the military hospital, and she was discharged. As Ahmad was an ex-soldier with an honorable discharge from service, the commandant of the hospital, an affable young colonel, gave an order for Ahmad and Aisha to be flown home in a helicopter. Aisha clutched a bouquet of flowers given to her by the female staff of the hospital as she boarded the helicopter. It was her first time flying in a chopper, but the thrill that should have come with it was diminished by the grief she still felt for her deceased mother. The 1-hour ride was smooth, and the chopper touched down on a field about 50 meters from Yusuf's home. Military personnel escorted them home. Yusuf, Aisha's brothers, and the whole village were there to welcome Aisha back home. A fine bedlam erupted the moment Aisha entered the compound. Youths fired off locally made hunting guns into the air in celebration. An impromptu feast was started up as several women who had come with cooked food laid out meat, rice, plantains, yam, various types of soup, and millet on long tables. The party lasted into the night. Yusuf, Aisha, and Ahmad thanked the crowd for its love. Aisha addressed the crowd and gave assurances of the love shown to her being something she would be eternally grateful for. Aisha did appreciate the powerful welcome shown by her community, but she was also sad because her late mother was not there to join in the joy of her return. After the crowd had left, she asked Yusuf to take her to her mother's gravesite. They walked a short distance to the backyard where Zainab had been laid to rest. A concrete headstone on the grave was inscribed with her name. Aisha sobbed as she stood in solemnity and in prayer at the grave. Losing her has been very painful, said Yusuf. I miss her every day. Those who kidnapped you caused her death. She lost the will to live, for she thought the kidnappers had killed you after she waited in vain for your release for months. They walked back to the house in sadness and quietude. Ahmad, exhausted from the day's activities, which had started in the morning at the army hospital and culminated in the energetic welcome home party for Aisha, was sleeping on a sofa. Aisha and Yusuf sat on the other sofa in the living room and talked about all that had transpired during the past few months. Aisha narrated with pain her unfortunate and dramatic saga, right from the day the kidnap had occurred to the daring escape from the hellhole of the ZOBBO camp. Yusuf was spellbound as Aisha told her story. He was enraged at the suffering his daughter had been put through by the ZOBBO organization, but he also shook his head a number of times in amazement at Ahmad's bravery, particularly at the tail end of their escape. Aisha recalled one of the dreadful episodes of her ordeal. The first week was pure hell, and I tried to kill myself. But I changed my mind and switched to prayers for God's deliverance, she said. That was a hell on earth created by evil men that you were taken to and came back alive, said Yusuf. Glory be to God for his mercies. Aisha wanted to know about what specifically had killed her mother. What happened? She asked. Well, she became sick from the stress of your situation, like I said, and we were managing her here in the house with occasional visits to the hospital. The day before she passed, I took her to the hospital after she complained of fever and palpitations. She was admitted to the hospital. I stayed with her until late at night when I went home to sleep. I returned the next morning to learn that she passed away during the night. Zainab never had heart palpitations before. I later learned that the condition comes with stress. Aisha wiped away tears from her face as she listened. Your mother, may her soul rest in peace, was my rock. A major part of me died when she left us. She was never the same from the moment she heard the awful news about what had happened to you. The stress sickened her. She lost her appetite and wouldn't eat. I tried everything I could to cheer her up, and we prayed every day for your release. In the end, she couldn't bear the pain anymore. Yusuf wiped his teary eyes with a handkerchief as he spoke about his wife. She was his sweetheart right from his youthful days in secondary school. He had met her during an inter-secondary sports competition. He was competing in the high jump, and she was a sprinter for her school. Zainab had faced pressure from her parents to marry a rich businessman after she had finished secondary school 2 years later. But she was in love with Yusuf, who was at that time enrolled at the police college as a cadet. Zainab's parents thought it was foolhardy of her to wait for a guy still in training to become a police officer when the businessman was available and ready to take on the responsibilities of taking care of a wife. But Zainab stuck with her decision and waited until Yusuf passed out of the college. They were married within a month and were married for 25 years. Ahmad left in the morning to return to his home about 2 hours away. He planned to reunite with Ibrahim, whom he had called earlier to let him know he was back. Ibrahim had jumped for joy, for like Aisha's late mother, he too had thought that his brother was dead. After being gone for months without any communication from him. The second thing Ahmad wanted to do was to make arrangements for his wedding to Aisha. Ahmad had boarded an interstate bus for his journey home. Just before he left Aisha's family home, there was an emotional parting with Aisha, who wept. Ahmad was like a guardian angel to her now, and she was afraid of being separated from him, even though Ahmad would be gone only temporarily. She held him tightly and wouldn't let go for several minutes. "I will return to get you," he told her. "I am going home to prepare for our wedding. I will be back." She still would not let go of him for another minute, but he held still until she loosened her hold. He kissed her on the cheeks, squeezed her hands tightly, and turned around to board a tricycle which would take him to the bus station about a mile away. The bus, which would take him home, had taken off with a full load of passengers. It approached a checkpoint about an hour into the journey and slowed down. The driver suspected the bandana-clad armed men at the checkpoint to be ZOBBO operatives, and he sped through the checkpoint at a blistering speed. The armed men fired shots at the vehicle, but no one was hit. Ahmad had thought he was about to be traumatized all over again, and he had broken out in a sweat. But the bus driver, a regular on the bus route, had deployed uncanny intuition to run the checkpoint, barreling down at one of the armed men who had stepped in the middle of the road to conduct a traffic stop and nearly crushing him into the asphalt had he not jumped off the road at the last second. "Were those ZOBBO fighters we just passed at that checkpoint?" someone asked the driver. "I think so," said the driver. "They are everywhere nowadays," said someone else. "What is our government doing about this?" "I see them every now and then at the illegal checkpoints," said the driver, "and I run them every time." Ahmad arrived home to his very happy brother, who hugged him in excitement. Unlike Aisha, there was no fanfare for Ahmad. He anticipated none anyway. His mission, which was discreet from the very beginning, was accomplished, and that was all that mattered. Ahmad rested up for 3 days in his house, during which period Ibrahim's maids cooked and served him. Most of the time he was laid up in bed or talked to Aisha on the phone. He also received business reports from Ibrahim, who had run the business profitably during Ahmad's absence. He therefore had enough money in the bank to pay for his wedding. Cultural and religious practice required of Ahmad to present a nice gift to Aisha and pay a formal bride price to her family. After a religious ceremony to be presided over by an imam, a feast would follow. For her gift, Ahmad bought Aisha a brand new Toyota SUV. He had traveled south to a large city to purchase the vehicle and drove it home himself. When he later called Aisha to inform her about the purchase, she shed tears of joy. She had long concluded that Ahmad was a special man. She recalled long ago when she had snubbed him at that army checkpoint, but he had persisted and won her love. She now looked forward to their wedding and spending the rest of her life with him. Ahmad and Aisha's marriage took place 2 months after their return home, and it involved a 3-step process. First, they had to formally tie the knot in a ceremony in a mosque to be officiated by an imam. Although Ahmad had proposed to her before and she had accepted, that event was steeped in Western culture, not recognized by their religion. Her acquiescence to his proposition therefore did not count at that time. What would count would be her response to his proposition before the officiating imam, and her affirmative response would immediately precede the blessing and pronouncement by the imam of the legal and religious approval of the marriage. The ceremony in the mosque was well attended. Aisha wore a beautiful wedding gown. Her high-heeled shoes lifted her already tall frame higher. Coupled with her white hijab and white wedding dress, which shone in the midday sun, she looked gorgeous. Ahmad wore a traditional tunic with gold embroidery and cufflinks. The atmosphere inside the mosque was solemn and dignified. The Imam read from the Holy Book, asked the necessary questions of the couple, then blessed the union. Thereafter, the couple signed the papers for official records. Ahmad gave Aisha gold jewelry as gifts for the occasion. The second step in the marriage process was Ahmad's payment of Aisha's bride price and the delivery of his main gift to her. The bride price, which was traditionally set at a modest fee, was given to Yusuf. As Ahmad had already bought a vehicle for Aisha, presentation was delayed until she moved in with him. The third and final step was a feast of celebration, and it was hosted the next day at his home. Relatives and friends, including the soldiers who had cared for Aisha, were in attendance. Aisha's village community was bussed to the event. The massive feast featured a variety of food, meats of various types, beef, poultry, and lamb, fish, rice, millet, couscous, vegetables, fruits, cake, ice cream, various types of stew and soup, and bread rolls. Non-alcoholic drinks, soft drinks, malt beverages, Perrier water, fruit juices, tea, and coffee were plentiful. Ahmad and Aisha were moderate Muslims who weren't averse to music and dancing, as long as the lyrics were clean and decent, and the dancing was free of touching and excluded sexually suggestive moves. Acceptable music and dancing capped the feast, which ended well into the night. Their first day together in his home as a married couple on the day after the feast was an emotional one. They went over what they had endured in the ZOBBO camp as a cathartic exercise. Then they resolved to forever forget about the experience. They had survived by the special grace of God, and they would devote their lives to each other, their faith, and to philanthropic activity. They boarded a plane the next day to Dubai for their honeymoon. End of chapter 10 and end of the book.